we've got a special conversation with Dr. Brendan Nelson, who's the president of Boeing Global, and just as significantly, a member of Club HFX, and our board chair, Janice Stein. So thanks very much, and then we will take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm going to skip the formal introduction because I had the pleasure of being at a lunch yesterday with Brendan when he spent time with our women in peace leaders. And I discovered that Brendan Nelson is a physician. After he was a physician, he became president of the Australian Medical Association. And for anybody in politics, you understand your life is easy in comparison to being the president of a medical association. Then I think he wanted a new challenge, so he entered politics, was Australia's Minister of National Defence. Apparently, that job became routine for you, so he then went on and applied to become director of Australia's War Memorial without ever having any background in a museum. So we had a great lunch in which we talked about what makes great leaders, how did we all understand these traditions, these transitions in which you could move across silos like that. So that's what I want to talk about with you, Brendan, in the time we have. But let me start first. Why Halifax? Why have you been such a consistent supporter of the Women in Peace program? What makes Halifax special for you?
Well, Janice, firstly, it's my privilege to be able to spend some time with you, let alone have a conversation with you, and to further add to what I've done, which gives context. For 4 years, I was Australia's Minister for Education, which, as Thomas Jefferson said, is the defence of the nation, and represented my country at NATO and the European Union for 3 years. The Boeing company is very committed to the Halifax International Security Forum. The reason for that is because context is everything, absolutely everything. And I often say to young people, don't fall into the trap of seeing the world through a straw. You need to be interested in and interesting to the world. And the Halifax International Security Forum, in my view, in our company's view, gives us an opportunity to be exposed to diverse opinions and views, to be informed about the most consequential geopolitical realignment that is occurring in our lifetime, the dimensions of this, particularly for countries that are democracies. One of the paradoxes of life that you observe is that people have a tendency to take for granted those things that are most important to them. As an Australian, I live in a country of political, economic and religious freedoms where faith coexists with reason, free academic inquiry, a free press, an independent judiciary, as do people who've come here from those countries. That's not to suggest that our system we regard as superior to any other, but it's certainly the value system that drives us. And I must say, for the Boeing company, it's a very proud parent company. It's an American company. It's very, very important for us to support dialogue.
You made a comment to us that the world is going through the most significant geopolitical transition that it has experienced in the last 75 years. Yeah. Tell me how all the different careers you've had help you understand that transition.
Well, there are people in this audience that have forgotten more about this than I will ever know. But the world in which you and I have grown up and lived has gone. It's never going to come back. And in my view, in reflecting on it, humankind is going through a major transformation. Paul Kennedy, the Richard Dilworth Professor of History at Yale, made the observation over a decade ago that after major cataclysms like the Napoleonic Wars or the Second World War, you can see the world's changed, it's obvious, and it's never going to be the same again. But when you think about the late 15th century, over 4 decades, just look at what happened as humankind went through that major transition of formation of nation states, the expansion of Europe into the Asias and North America, the Gutenberg telecommunications revolution, all of these and other changes over 4 decades. A person, as Paul Kennedy said, who lived in 1480 would not have recognised the world of 1520.
Right.
Just think back. Peter MacKay and I were defence ministers at about the same time. And I think back to the challenges we were dealing with in the 2000s compared to what we deal with now. So you made the observation yesterday, it's a world of disorder. Henry Kissinger marked his 100th birthday with an interview with the Wall Street Journal, and he described this as a world of disorder. He said that nation states have lost their internal orientation. The United States, he said, has lost belief in its historical ambitions and confidence in its institutions. That's what he has said. And as you look at the world, the Sino-American relationship, as Kissinger said, has riven the world. It's taking us to a world we've not lived in since the Franco-Prussian War or the Qing dynasty. We've had Russia invade a sovereign nation, something that we thought we'd left behind at the end of the Second World War. And then a fractious, polarised US political class, which itself creates significant challenges in a great American democracy. A major energy transition that's underfoot, an existential environmental challenge in the form of climate change, a major energy transition that's having an impact not just on our world but contributing to a complex operating environment. And then, of course, where we thought were reaching a much more stable situation in the Middle East, then these heinous, barbarous attack on Israeli civilians by Hamas on the 7th of October and the unfolding tragedy that's come from it. So I think the privilege that I had in coming from the medical profession, and one of the Women Peace Fellows is herself a physician, is it gives you an understanding of people. And one of the key things in life, gratuitous advice to young people, is knowing what people think is important, but understanding how they think is much more important. And what the Halifax International Security Forum gives us is an opportunity to get a sense of how people are actually thinking, what's forming their worldview and shaping the way they see the world.
By the way, you're looking at me, so you can see the huge smiles that spread across the faces of the Women in Peace Fellows. And they all looked around to the woman leader who's a physician and smiled.
Well, we're going to, by the way, we're going to support the further initiatives in the Women Peace Fellows.
That's a wonderful announcement, which we haven't made, but you just put it on the table. With your leadership, we will be able to bring back next year to the forum all the women alumni from the Women in Peace Fellowship next year.
Well,
we want to thank you very much.
No, we thank you. And it's interesting that we're very committed as a company to diversity and inclusion. It's critically important that we have people have different backgrounds, see the world differently, think differently. You have to have a mind that's open to the unfamiliar as much as new innovative ideas and technology. But people will often argue we need more women in leadership and positions, and we certainly do. But less often, other than a 50-50 gender mix, do people put an argument. In my experience, women bring a heightened sensitivity to the needs of the future and to think about the future. For a lot of my colleagues, when I talk about vision, which differentiates leadership from management, their eyes often glaze over. But women more so get it. And that is one of the reasons why I think your initiative with the Women Peace Fellows is important and be supported.
Well, thank you again. You know, it's interesting, as we were listening to Penny Pritzker speak earlier, and she said, look, there's the double helix, right?
Yeah.
There is security, but you don't have security unless you have prosperity, but you don't have prosperity unless you have security. Looking back at what you have done, let's add a third one, which is education. You've been Minister of Education, and that is so intimately tied up with a deeper understanding of national security and prosperity. Tell us why, I think it would interest everybody in the room, why your last career transition before Google was to take on the Australian War Museum.
I love Google, but I'm Boeing.
Well, sorry, Boeing, yes.
No.
Yeah, you're right, you're Boeing.
I'm happy to take on a few things, but I wouldn't want to take...
You're Boeing.
Yeah. It's interesting, I had been in... I say this to the young people, everyone's young at my age, but to the 15-year-olds that have been a part of this program, and Maxine from New Zealand yesterday said of all of the things she'd done in the program, the time with those 15-year-olds was the most consequential for her. But I say this to young people, you've only got one life. You've only got one chance to use it in a way which makes a difference to the lives of others. I had been in Brussels for 2 years. We were in a NATO-led war. We had no real relationship with NATO. My job was to get us to the table. We managed to achieve that, to change the relationship with the European Union. 2 years into the job, the Prime Minister asked me if I'd do an extra year, 4 years instead of 3. And I just said, look, if I do 4 years, I'll just be doing the 3rd year again. It'll be time to go home. And it was the time that I spent in the cemeteries in Flanders that actually meant much more to me than the heads of state and the ambassadors and all the excellencies and things you deal with. And so I found out quite by accident that the director's job at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra was available. As soon as I found out, I applied for it. And I went to an interview and in fact, one of the interviewers asked me if I knew much about museums. I said, well, I've visited a few. And he asked me if I'd ever run one. And I said, no, of course not, you know that. And he said, well, why on earth would we appoint someone like you to run this preeminent museum and memorial? And I said, well, if you're looking for an expert, my advice firstly is not to. But I've learned something about experts as they have a tendency, as I said earlier, to see the world through a straw. And the key task in leadership of these institutions is to apply intellectual rigour to the process of exercising judgment. And you draw on all the expertise that you have inside and outside of it. When I got the job, several people said to me, you're going to run a museum? You're going to run the Australian War Memorial? One person said to me, you're wasting your life. You've got more to do for our country than rearrange its history. And I said to them, well, it's actually got much more to do with the future than it does the past. A sense of history is absolutely vital to any understanding of the future.
Yeah.
History is the reminder that hard decisions have to be made and the consequences of making them and of not making them. History can also demolish prejudice. It also has the capacity to inspire people, particularly leaders facing new, emerging and increasingly hostile horizons. So I go to Washington, DC a lot. I've probably been there 50 or 60 times in my professional life. My staff will tell you I always go to 2 places. Even if it's just for 10 minutes. I go to the Holocaust Museum to remind me of the depths to which human beings are capable of descending in certain circumstances, even those that are educated. And then I go to the Jefferson Memorial to remind me of Thomas Jefferson's still unfulfilled promissory constitutional note, not just to Americans, but to those of us who come from and believe in liberal democracies. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
So how lucky are we to have not only Boeing, but you as global CEO, as a supporter of the forum. I think the message that you've given us all, which aligns so much with the spirit of the forum, is that we learn from each other by moving out of our silos. And so we have in the room women, 15-year-olds, private sector leaders, military leaders, ministers, senior civil servants. In fact, it's exactly that. It's not seeing the world through a straw.
I'd just say finally, Janice, particularly to young people, always... I don't know what that was, but I'd just say to young people, the most fragile yet powerful of human emotions is hope, paradoxically. We all have to believe that tomorrow is going to be better than today, that next year is going to be better than this year. And there's a lot in the world about which to be concerned, and we're discussing it here. And what most sustains it is men and women who reach out and support one another, even in the face of their own adversities. And Kenneth Clark, who did that stunning series on civilizations in the 60s, at the very end, he concluded his analysis of civilization from its origins through to the mid-20th century. And he said that no matter how fragile society may be, it is lack of confidence more than anything else that destroys a civilization. We can destroy ourselves with cynicism and disillusionment just as effectively as by bombs. And that in particular, is a message that I think we need to disseminate.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next year in Halifax.
You will,
Safe
Dennis.
travels.
That's if Boeing keeps me on. They might be in trouble after all this.
We'll see you anyway.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we make this short transition.
So, it was
Can I just say Steve Markle is brilliant. Wherever you are, you combine wit and wisdom and images and sound and words in just such a terrifically effective way. Thank you for setting this up. Yeah. You are just the best. So innovation isn't optional. It is imperative. We are seeing a suite of emerging technologies changing the way war is fought, and it is even creating new domains for warfighting in the future, cyber, space, just a couple of examples. I have a great panel here. Let me introduce, starting from the end, Liam Maxwell is Director of Government Transformation at Amazon Web Services. Sitting next to him is President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarovic, did I get it? The President of Croatia. Pleased to also have with us Hanno Pevkur, who is Estonia's Minister of Defense, and sitting next to me is Senator Mike Rounds of South Dakota, a member of the Armed Services Committee. Steve set this up perfectly. I had not seen that film, but my first question is about generative AI, which terrifies some people and thrills some people. Let me ask you each, quick round-robin question here. How is it going to change warfighting? Senator, why don't I start on this end?
It's already started. Nagorno-Karabakh War, September 2021. A good example, Armenia loses Nagorno-Karabakh to Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan uses drones and new equipment to take out heavy artillery. They do it in a matter of 44 days. Part of what they used were drones that had some segments of artificial intelligence to pick out, identify targets in a kill zone, and take them out without a human in the loop.
Well, I'm just wondering that after that, what we saw, that do we have to sit here in the panel? So it's just, continue with, with this ChatGPT and get all the answers. But nevertheless, I believe, artificial intelligence is something we see more and more, and it has been on the battlefield already for a long time. So it's just, we didn't call it artificial intelligence, but when we talk about targeting, when we talk about, intelligence, what we're gathering with all the assets we have, so it has been on the battlefield for a long time.
But generative AI, how's that going to change?
But generative AI, so for me, the main question is actually an ethical question. So how far do we go? And at what moment we will, go away from this, that somebody has to pull the trigger. So this is the question, and it doesn't matter, which the trigger is. So when we can find also this question be answered, then we can talk about, how we can use a generative AI in the future more on the battlefield.
Madam President, worried about killer robots?
In a way I am, but just to build upon what my colleague said, in order not to be repetitive, I'm just going to recall a situation that one of the participants of the Halifax International Forum this year had, Mr. Petro Poroshenko, when the UK businessman Bill Bowder announced in May of this year that he had a weird Teams conversation with somebody who pretended to be Petro Poroshenko. And it was actually an NI-generated deepfake voice and so audio and video of the former president of Ukraine. And Mr. Bowder became suspicious only when the so-called former president of Ukraine asked for sanctions to be lifted for Russian oligarchs. And when people tell me that they Googled me, I tell them all of those photos of me in bikinis, fake. I can only imagine what generative AI can do to all of us. So the biggest problem, disinformation, erosion of trust into politicians, into institutions, into governments, and the question of regulation. It has not been regulated. On our side, in the transatlantic community, we worry about ethics, we worry about the rules, but do our adversaries also worry about the same things when it comes to the application of AI? And how do we proceed on the national and international level to regulate the space of artificial intelligence?
Liam, your thoughts on generative AI and the changes it will.
So I agree with the I agree with the senator. I mean, it's started, but the thing to remember here is this is very, very early in the development of this particular technology, and I think it's almost we're looking at things where we're sort of 3 steps into a 10-kilometer race, and so the decisions and the ideas we're having now will be formative but things are going to develop very differently as we go through. And I think that one of the points that Madam President pulled out is that it's about trust. It's about being able to have trust in the services and the systems that you use, and that requires a certain level of transparency. And that's very important in anyone who's developing any of the services and systems for people to trust them.
So regulations were brought up by the president. You're shaking your head.
I'm shaking my head.
And
Let me share.
Okay.
Okay? We're either going to win this race or not. The problem is this race does not have an ending to it right now.
Exactly.
But we've got adversaries that right now that are trying their very best to create AI, to use it as a tool, whether you're talking air, land, sea, space, or cyberspace operations. The people that can do it the quickest, the fastest, the most powerful, they're going to win this battle. Our adversaries could care less about whether or not we regulate ourselves. What they care about is whether or not they have a system which is better than ours. So number one, we want to make the systems put together that we incentivize the development of AI within our communities, not in theirs. And we want to slow down their developments. And finally, yeah, we've got to have the confidence of the people that we represent. You're talking about protecting personal information, and you're talking about transparency. But if you do it to where you chase these folks out, and there's a lot of people out there that have the capabilities, if you chase them away from here, they're going to go to a third country, and that third country may not be our friend.
Thoughts on regulation?
Yes. Can I, Senator, also, pose a question in that regard? So the AI currently is not regulated. Actually, it pertains to the domain of the individual companies who create different programs and innovation. Now, in our case, when it comes to investment into AI, and what can potentially be looked at as dual-use technologies, we have investors or financial institutions who are not prone to invest because they do not want to participate in war-making. Or we have companies who will not share their products with governments and everybody else because they don't want to participate in war-making. Now, Russia and China don't have that problem because the companies who produce, who are the ones who come up with innovation, including AI in Russia and China, they're state-controlled. And the state has access to every kind of information. So that is a huge advantage. And that's why, in my opinion, we do have to look at the way how we regulate that. It's not just the rogue actors that are below or above the state level. It's also the fact that unregulated, undemocratic societies can have more advantage of the new technologies than we can because of the freedom of expression and everything else that we cherish, and which is one of our fundamental values. So how do we get beyond that?
Well, in military, what we do normally is that we talk about offensive and defensive capabilities. So there's the question that when we go back to Estonia, cyber attack conducted by Russia in 2007, like first state-orchestrated cyber attack, then we had to shut down all our internet traffic to reopen it piece by piece. But there was a counter-offensive or let's say defensive move. Now is the question that when we talk about generative AI, then is the question that, okay, it will make a decision or it will make a move. Now is the question that what will be the counter move or the counter action. So let's imagine that, we put together the generative AI and deepfake. So and we will have a message coming out from the White House that the president is saying that he will launch a nuclear missile to China. So and what will be the response? Will the Chinese be able, or vice versa? Will we be able to acknowledge that this was an artificial intelligence created deep fake, or we act immediately? And this is in case of 2007, we were able to identify the attack and to take the measures. In AI situation, I believe that we are in a much more difficult situation that the same AI has to acknowledge also the counter move if necessary. So we will enter into the new phase of normality maybe, and we yet do not know how we will come out of that. So
I'm curious, how many of you have played around with ChatGPT? Anybody? almost everyone. It's amazing the speed with which this is spreading.
So this is what I'm saying, that that just imagine that when let's say that I hope that it will never happen, that let's say that we have also the answer to that we will when the system of defense will hear some words, let's say that US president launched something, and automatically there will be a response, and somebody or some system will launch a countermeasure. So then we will end up, in a conflict which was created by the artificial intelligence.
Fight fire with fire.
Exactly. So we do not know where we end up, with all of that.
So what do we do? I mean, there has been a proposal that we put a pause on this, but the counter argument is if we put a pause on it,
they will never put the pause.
If we put a pause on it.
But I'll ask you, just coming back to your point there, is what is all of our systems of defence for the last 70 years have been based on the basis of deterrence. So what is the deterrent against which you may apply that, or do we have to think about things in a completely different framework?
No. I believe deterrence has to be there. So and then it's not linked directly to artificial intelligence. At the end of the day, once again, we talk about this. That okay, we read also here that I do not have emotions. I believe when he answered to different questions, I felt there is emotion involved. But when we say that there is a human touch for reaction, then we can also regulate it, and then we can have the proper response to that. If there is no human touch, only artificial intelligence will communicate, then.
And therefore, as our deterrence, we need to have some form of a deterrence about people deploying completely automated solutions.
Exactly, of course.
But they don't have emotions, but they're able to detect emotions. And in the programs that are applied in the battlefields today, when you take a massive amount of data to analyze, from weather conditions to the positions of the enemy, to using information that you get from civilians and from everybody else, even using instruction manuals for different technologies, these generative AI programs that simulate warfare are able to predict the emotional reactions of the troops on the ground as well.
Yeah, so, if I may, just one quick additional topic to that. So about this human touch. The question is that let's because why we have still the regulations that any kind of weapon you are using, it has to be controlled by the human being. When we take the side mines, you cannot have the like moving sensors adapted to that it will launch automatically. There has to be a human who launches the side mine. So, and it's the same with any other. So when we end up in the situation that we will collect all the information from the intelligence, from the satellites, from all the places to the battlefield management system. And the battlefield management system will also say that, okay, now we have to launch the rocket or the missile to some spot. Then, we will end up in the situation where we are not controlling the war anymore.
Now, the Pentagon has guidelines on that, saying a human has to be in the loop.
Well,
is it enough?
No, look, let's be clear. There's a difference between an offensive weapon and a defensive weapon. And I think most of the folks in here that have a uniform on would recognize that if you're talking about hypersonic missiles incoming to any type of a warship, it's not a matter of somebody ringing a bell and then somebody getting up and going and checking a radar to see whether or not it's something that they might consider a threat. By that time, it's too late. What you will have, though, is a system which is armed, and it is now looking for the threats that might be incoming. And when that happens, that is turned on. And once that is on and it is starting to determine whether or not that threat is real, there's not going to be a human that's going to pull a trigger. The trigger has been pulled. It's a matter of whether or not it's going to take out that incoming missile. So there is a difference, even today, between an offensive and a defensive capability when it comes to the taking of a person that's in the loop or a person who is on the loop or over the loop. And in some cases, once you've armed it and you've laid out the parameters, It's armed, it's ready to go. It's like a mousetrap. It's ready to spring.
So I do want to go to your question shortly, but before we do, I want to talk a little bit about lessons learned. You mentioned Estonia, 2007, subjected to a barrage of cyber attacks. Estonia has turned around and become one of the cyber leaders in Europe. You innovated. How did you do it? What was the key?
Well, the key, of course, in the Estonian case, of course, it's not the same when we talk about the US or Canada, because, Estonia is a small country and we were able to close all the channels coming into Estonia and, then controlling opening of the channels. So this was our chance. What else we did was that we created the Cyber Defense League, which is basically a voluntary-based high-tech community, which consists all the private sector, bright brains, and we can engage them immediately if needed. So yes, we've taken these lessons, and now what we are doing from Ukraine. So once again we are taking these lessons learned from Ukraine, and it's a lot to learn.
Yeah, so what are the lessons from Ukraine? There are many when it comes to innovation. Liam, you want to start that off?
Yeah, so one of the, we did a lot of work with the Ukrainian government very early on in the war, and one of the things we learned from that was that continuity is really the most important thing for a government to be able to run. Not just because if a government cannot operate, you can't actually demonstrate that you're looking after your people. So one of the first things they wanted us to help them with was to extract the registries so that the government could still continue to run wherever it was, and it started running in the cloud. So the innovation around that was then to think about, actually, what does continuity mean for a government? What are the things you need to save? What are the things you need to back up to ensure the civilian government can continue to run? Because that's just as important as having the military defense in place.
Madam President?
For me, one of the biggest lessons learned is that when you're facing mass production, mass human resources, etc., one of the most efficient ways to do that, if you lack the same amount of weapons or people, is to counter mass with precision. And this is where technology comes in. We look at the war in Ukraine, mostly it's reported as type of a World War I, World War II warfare, a combination of trench warfare and artillery fire. However, for Ukrainians, one of the crucial advantages, which I think was apart from the morale and the fact that they were fighting for their own country, what was crucial in the first phases of the war is that they were able to use the technology so much better than the Russians, that the Russians in the beginning completely disregarded the modern technology, which does not mean that they're doing the same right now. So Ukrainians were able to combine the artillery and the weapons, the rockets, the missiles, with very sophisticated ways of how to use the limited number of ammunition to be as precise as possible in striking military target. So using these different apps that I mentioned, that you get in information from different sources, and algorithms choose the targets and the best way to target that. And in addition to that, also, this does not pertain to artificial intelligence, but also the command and control structures, very hierarchical, very outdated Russian structures, in comparison to Ukrainian, where you move the responsibility to lower ranks and lower commanders in the field who are able to respond very quickly and swiftly before Russians get their answer back from Moscow.
So in terms of innovation, as a defense minister, what do you take away from Ukraine?
Well, for sure, there are many things to take, but well, a couple of things. First, what that war has shown us: be innovative on the battlefield. You have to be innovative. Decentralize as much as you can, because all the communications, everything, you have to be ready to take the decisions on the platoon level. Do not be afraid to make mistakes, and be flexible. When we take Ukrainian army at the moment, I'm gladly say that they're world champions of interoperability. They have full scale of world weaponry, and they are using all of that. They're putting Storm Shadow under the MiG and shooting that. So in normal way, in NATO standards, it takes, I don't know, 10 years to put a new type of long precision weapon to under the fighter jet. So it took for them a couple of weeks to do that. So this is what we have to take of that. Be innovative, be flexible, use Peugeot 206 for Stinger if necessary, so as a platform. So this is what they do, and they are using and they are bringing so much new information. DJI, or I cannot say the name of the company. So just civil drones to drop the grenades, whatever. Be innovative and let people to be innovative.
Senator, thoughts on Ukraine and what we've taken away in terms of innovation?
I don't think a war between superpowers would last 2 weeks. And I think if we're not prepared going in order to respond to a first strike and to be able to immediately respond with appropriate amounts of weapons and with the ability to have communications, command and control in such a fashion that it can withstand that first strike, then I think we're in real trouble. And as an organization, we, number one, have to have the munitions in advance. You can't wait for the war to start. Second of all, you've got to have the equipment, and the equipment has got to be interoperable. And this is no longer a matter of either a sea battle or an air battle or a land battle. This is using all of the different areas, air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace, and you will never have another major conflict without having cyber activity and space warfare.
And knowledge and information.
We have two questions right up here. Where are our microphone runners? Two gentlemen right next to one another. We'll see who grabs it first. And if you could identify yourself and keep your questions or observations short so we can fit
Luis
more.
Rubio from Mexico. The risks and the dangers of the technology that you've just described are obvious, at least conceptually. Which is more dangerous, social media or artificial intelligence?
Can you separate them?
Liam puts his head in his hands. Anybody want to take a stab?
They are one and the same. Look, misinformation is one thing, but artificial intelligence supercharges it. Artificial intelligence is what can be used to make it look closer to the truth, but still get a misinformed public to believe it. But the other piece on it is that we shouldn't be afraid of artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence will also be the tool that we use to combat that misinformation in the first place.
To identify it.
To identify it and to combat it.
Okay, and we have another question.
Harris from the University of Ottawa. So clearly, as one of the panelists mentioned, we've taken the first 3 steps in a multi-kilometer journey here of battle to control or to dominate AI. Generative AI is a battle not just to get the best models, but to have the best models because they themselves will generate the next best models. And I entirely buy the senator's argument about how essential it is not to fall behind in that race. My concern, though, is that there are huge risks associated with this arms race. And, you know, I actually thought ChatGPT's answer was pretty good. Like, we need to also be thinking about how we're going to develop some kind of regimes, at least to prevent advanced AI models from proliferating into the hands of actors who might create pandemic pathogens, for example. So I would like to hear more from the panel about how we're going to manage the risks of this race, too.
Yeah. Does that come back to that question I asked earlier about deterrence? Because if we end up trying to determine, one of the things, the technology is moving so fast that if we try and determine, and any government trying to regulate and trying to determine it, will have built something brilliantly for what was there 5 years ago. So we need to have some very clear themes and tenets that we hold to, which mean that deterrence can be effective. And I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what those are, but the point I was trying to make is that it's going to change massively, much faster than we can legislate for. Therefore, we need to take a different approach to deterrence.
Is it also changing too fast for militaries to keep up with? Procurement is slow. Technology moves fast. Mr. Minister, how do we bring those into alignment, or can we?
Well, you know, the problem for military normally is that, you know, when you buy something for your military, it will be in use for 20 to 30 years.
Exactly.
So when you build an air carrier, so it will be in service for 50 years. So of course you can, you know, also take you know, a Beetle and modify it to the modern needs, but still, you know, the problem is in the military. So and this is why I believe that for the future, you know, still we have to be flexible, and we have to be ready to use the technology. I fully agree that we have many challenges ahead of us, and but I was watching one Netflix documentary about the scientific you know, research where they tried to find a cure for the cancer, and they put the machine, you know, and they thought, what happens when they turn around that, you know, that what happens when they give the task to the computer to find molecular for a cancer.
Right.
And they let it work, you know, and they came back the next morning and they thought that nothing happens. At the end of the day, there was like tens of formulas how to create a cancer, you know, by the computer. So you know, this is why I believe we really need these regulations, but also acknowledging that setting the regulations doesn't mean that we will not have the misuses. We always have. So we have drugs, but we have also narcotics. So it's a everlasting fight.
Madam President, do you have thoughts, particularly on this speed
Yes.
issue?
You know, one of my biggest frustrations in every job that I was in was when I proposed something and wanted to do something new, the instinctive response of the civil service was, oh, we have not done this before, this isn't the way that we do things, et cetera.
And they don't want to take risks.
And they
correct?
don't want to take risks, and it takes them forever to take a decision. You know, I was president of the country. It frustrates me when politicians who are the ultimate decision makers when it comes to procurement, when it takes them forever to take a decision. In my opinion, it's better to take 10 decisions, 6 of them wrong, 5 of them right, than to be working forever on one. So risk-taking is necessary. With procurement, it's ridiculous thinking that the cheapest product is the best one, that adhering to some of the elements, oh, come on. I mean, China and Russia are gonna roll over all of us if we don't change those procurement rules. And the dual-use technologies, keeping companies back because what they produce can be used for military purposes. So there's so many issues, and I've talked a lot to the private sector as well. I mean, they have responsibilities as well that I mentioned earlier when they don't want to share their products. But when it comes to regulation, we have to remember that one of the basic tenets of our societies is democracy, and that AI space is democratized in the sense that it's accessible to everyone. So anyone with access to internet can use ChatGPT, which, by the way, sometimes just makes up information and data, or even more dangerous programs that will tell them how to make a biological weapon or something like that.
Liam?
So I'm afraid I am a former civil servant. And part of my job actually these days is I go and help governments modernise at speed. And part of what people ask me is, oh, thank goodness you've done this before. So I found someone who's done it, because most of the time the question is not how much does this cost? The question is who's done this before? Now, one of the ways, and sorry to get really nerdy for 20 seconds on government procurement, is to create government procurement mechanisms which enable enable innovation, which take away the continual requirement to go right from the beginning at every procurement. And we did this in the United Kingdom with something called the G-Cloud, which enabled us to have a permissive procurement framework into which people could join and leave every 6 months. So you got the best new startups joining it. And once you were inside the tent, you know, you'd qualified, then you went through smaller, quicker procurements, which enable people to get going quickly. And deploying that with effective security in the defense space would enable businesses, large and small, to be able to get their solutions to the hands of the people that need them massively quicker and generate local economic growth.
the F-35. How many of you in here have ordered F-35s? A few of you? Okay. It was an example of one where it's been promised for a long time, but we're now into the point where they're actually flying, and now this is a flying computer. But it's a flying computer which has to be upgraded. It's now plug and play. There are parts of it that can be taken out and other parts put in. We learned from our mistakes in the F-35. The B-21 stealth bomber flew for the first time this last week. Now, what we know is that that is a flying computer, but it's a flying computer which will have upgrades in it. Today on your computer, every single one of us on our phone, you get a program on it that says the updates, and you push it and you get your updates.
But you have to buy a new one after 2 years.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this one's going to last us 50 years. But that's what's going to happen is you're going to have updates, and what we learned is we can make that happen. Government has to have access to the same types of upgrades and the same type of, I've already purchased the thing, I want the upgrades, I'm going to buy the upgrades, and it's automated.
And that's why having effective spend control when you're putting, because everyone in a procurement always focuses on the glorious moment when you hand over the check and you buy the thing, and nobody ever asks the question, how do I get off it? And it's by putting that into the procurement function that enables people to take the long-term strategic decisions.
So you work for one of the big companies, Amazon.
Yep.
A lot of the innovation is taking place at very small companies.
Exactly.
How do you better plug them in?
Oh, exactly, because the whole point of the way that we approach...
They will buy it.
Sorry. But
he says you'll buy it.
No, that's genuinely not the case. In fact, it's very much not the policy that we do, because the whole point of our approach, say, to generative AI is that we're trying to democratize the access to the opportunity of generative AI. So rather than building a model, we produce the building blocks on which people can build their models. And by people, I mean a defense department or a small business. Because you can access the technology we produce using a credit card. I gave the Senator earlier an example. When I did a startup in 2000, I spent £2.5 million of money I raised on the IT. I could do that today using a credit card. I think I get to $60.
Can I ask a question? When you, I shop a lot over Amazon.com. Honestly.
Uh-oh, customer complaints.
But, you know, what do you do when you get these orders, you know, people pay by credit card? Do you analyze that? Are there algorithms who could predict that these are potential adversaries or terrorists? How do you react? Do you contact governments?
I can answer that question for the AWS business, because I work in AWS, not the Amazon business.
Yeah.
And yes, there's obviously a know your customer component that we go through. And to give you an example, actually, when the war in Ukraine started, we found we had no investment in Russia whatsoever. And so we were able to, we had no Russian state actors running on our services, no contracts there, but there were still some people who were running using credit cards. And as their credit cards ran out, that was the end of their ability to interact with us. Mm-hmm. And we have a very strong safety policy team who came along. And there was one time when somebody had bought a service through another provider that was using it for a group which we didn't want, you know, that shouldn't be on there. And we got alerted, we took it off within 30 minutes. So there are ways, and there's a fantastic essentially safety team within the organization, which is there to make sure that we have effective governance of the accounts that we run.
We have another question right back here. If I can get a microphone, please, right over here.
Thank you. Nicole Petrucci, Space Force. And then I'm also a 2022 fellow from that cohort. I have a question, thinking about space, since I'm from the Space Force. Space technology, it's a $447 billion industry, and that's up from $210 billion in 2010, and is projected to be about $1 trillion in 2030. And so, but the problem with these technologies is their dual use. They can be used for great purposes. So how do you promote growth and innovation in these industries while still managing those risks?
I believe most of the inventions and most of the most of what has come out from the military has ended up in the civil use. So we know that, and or vice versa. But mostly still, when we look at the history, then many inventions are coming from the military industry, ending up in the civil side. So, I believe we all have to urge that, and we all have to push that, because at the moment also in Estonia there is one very high-tech company who is producing something linked to the space, because they are using the space energy to make X-rays, not X-rays which are, but nevertheless, I will not go to that. So, but the point is that this clearly is a dual-use, device what they are bringing to us, and this is exactly what we have to do. And I believe, in every matter, in every invention, we have to keep that in mind. And when we talk about the private sector, the private sector first and foremost are interested of that it will go to the dual use, because this is much double of the money. From military they can take 4 times the price, and then in civil 2 times the price. So
it would also be fair to say that because the private sector has now invested in space, and they've now put lots of satellites up in space, a lot of those can be used not just for dual use, but that means that they are now at risk, because in a time of war, there's going to be every attempt to take those out of the picture. So part of the discussion also is how do you defend your own assets in space? And look, we're spending a huge amount of money in the United States, but a significant amount of it is also in some of the most exotic weapons that we've ever had before. But it's because we have to be equal to or better than our adversaries are, and a lot of that is in space, because we've got so many space-based systems that support all of the other activities, air, land, and sea, and cyber. And so they're gonna come after us. We're gonna go after them. This is not a race that we can afford to lose, and we have to be one step ahead of our adversaries. As long as we're one step ahead and they think we're one step ahead, we're probably safe. About the time they wonder whether they can challenge us in space, that's when things get dangerous down here on Earth.
We have another question back here from an individual. Actually, can I have you pass the mic to the gentleman in front of you? Because I know he's from Ukraine, and I'd love to hear
yes,
your
I am.
question.
Yeah, my name is Ihor Duretsky. I'm an Armed Forces of Ukraine soldier. In the past, I used to work with the cloud technologies. I used to be the senior developer advocate with one of the biggest nonprofits that are focused on the open source software in the cloud. And these days, I'm bringing the innovation and tech into the Ukrainian army. So since I'm with cloud, my biggest take here to the panel is what are the thoughts about using cloud in the highly regulated environments, kind of like the air-gapped environments and all that stuff? Because the cloud revolution in the private sector has happened almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. In the private sector, I believe there are still concerns about using cloud technologies and specifically for storing the data of the highly sensitive data and all that stuff. So, what's the take of the panel here, and what's the take about the cloud technologies right here?
Liam, that's made for you.
Yeah, let me just start. I mean, just one simple line to begin with. I mean, I was the CTO of the United Kingdom, and when I inherited my structure, I had 350 or so data centers around the country. I had no idea whether they were patched, whether they were together. We moved in 2013 to the cloud for the increased security posture that it gave us. And we've built significantly more on top of that. And that's one of the things that the cloud gives you, is the access to security that has been developed with the highest, you get the security at the level of the highest common denominator for the highest level people that are wanting to work with you on that. And also, just to give you a view of how does that continue, because I always believe that we believe that the incentives are there. We're a usage company, so if people don't trust us with their security, they won't use us. We don't get paid. We don't sell our services. So we have very strong incentives to make sure that the security is at the very highest level for our customers.
Mr. Minister?
Well, yeah, because we've been dealing with that for a long time, and at the end of the day, what I can say is about the belief. Do you believe or not? Because we had the same question. We've had electronic elections in Estonia since 2001.
Yeah.
So 23 years we've been electing our parliament electronically. And at the end of the day, do you believe in this technology or not? And of course, when I come to the state level, when you have a server, this server is linked to the internet somehow, and it can be hacked. It doesn't matter. Now is the question that do I believe more that I have a some hardware in my basement, which is linked with a wire, and it can be hacked. Or I have somewhere, not knowing exactly, but I have a gentleman who confirms me that it's secure. So this is the question at the end of the day. So you have to believe that. But when they can confirm me that and prove me that they are secure, they are safe, and they are credible, and these doors are really locked, then we don't have to be afraid of that. So at the end of the day, because Estonia has data embassies, so we collect our registries and we transfer our data out of Estonia to have them, in any case, secured in some other locations. So at the end of the day, once more, when we are connected via the internet, then it doesn't matter. Is it a server in your basement or somewhere in the clouds?
I would love to take the other question back there, too. You could hand the mic over.
Hi, Colonel Danielle Willis, U.S. Air Force. I also work at NORAD, and I have another data question. So as we look from our lens at globally integrated layered defense, we are relying on sharing data with our allies and partners so we can get a better view. So what technological solutions do you think need to be developed? And on the flip side, what are you doing on policy so that we can better share information between allies and partners?
Start with that.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is, well, we have in NATO, as you probably know, that we have also the the guys with the glasses, and we, on the cyber field. So sorry.
Oh.
Sorry.
They have beards. That's.
Yeah. So. At the end of the day, what is important that we have to share the information, and it's about the protocols, and it's about the sharing the information, and as always, when we talk about the spies, when we talk about people who steal the data, then we talk about the human mistake. Someone has made a mistake, or someone has given the access to our systems. So to share the data, we have to agree on the certain level of security, and to believe that every 31 countries at this very moment, 32 in a close neighborhood, or in the closest future, agree on that level of security, because you cannot be 110 or 100% sure all the time. There are leaks, there are loopholes, there are possibilities, backdoors, etc. So we have to trust each other. And during the war, I'm almost sure that when we go to Ukrainian war, you will not imagine how they transfer the data, because during the war, well, what is also important that the information you are sharing during the crisis or during the war has to be basically used so quickly that there is no point for your opponent or adversary to use this data, because it's already used. So it's not secret anymore. So many challenges ahead of us. We have 32 countries, 32 different understandings how to protect data, but we will be there, we will get there.
I have another question about the alliance. Is there enough coordination and planning when it comes to innovation? Your country, for instance, is out in front in terms of cyber protections. Are the other NATO countries all developing something similar? Are you trying, in a way, to direct development in each country so there isn't as much redundancy, number one? And number two, what are you doing to ensure it's all going to work together?
Well, more and more, I would say. We have Diana now, so one of the branches here in Canada, one in Tallinn, in Estonia.
Explain what Diana is.
Diana is the innovation, basically, innovation agency for NATO, just to put it very simple. We have DARPA. So the point is that Diana, what the gap Diana wants to fill is that we have different innovative ideas inside of NATO, looking at the defense needs. And now, when we take the first, time when we opened the beats, we had like 600 or even more beats and then we had money only for 50, I believe. So there are bright ideas outside on the market, and now we have to collect them. But yes, so we are going more and more to that, to have a common approach.
Yes, can I add to that? You know, coming from an EU member state of NATO, Croatia, which unfortunately is not really big on innovation and not participating specifically in Diana, which again frustrates me as a Croatian, but also as a transatlanticist. Another concern is this EU versus NATO mindset and competition that finally, I think we are overcoming in Brussels between NATO and the EU when we talk about
There's
European capabilities.
No.
Yes, there is a cooperation agreement, and we are getting there. And for years and years, the U.S. was complaining about Europeans being as free riders because we were not investing enough in defense, with the exception of Estonia and a few other countries. Now, yes, we have picked up, we're investing, but you know, my concern is where are we investing? The quality of that investment and the focus. Are we just spending money to be able to say that we're a 2% defense investment? Or are we targeting the real capacities? And then there's the dualism when people say, of course, the European capabilities need to be strengthened, especially industrial military base. But we also have to keep in mind that with the accession of Sweden, which hopefully will happen soon, 90% of the EU population will live in NATO countries. So this dualism is very artificial, and we need to get over it and think of compatibilities, of removing redundancy. And in Brussels, we're doing a good job. But what I'm concerned about is the national levels where we have institutions or departments who deal with the EU and those who deal with NATO. And there is practically this competition, which unfortunately is still kind of a hallmark of the civil service, as you withhold information, you do the planning and stovepiping instead of coordinating together and thinking we're talking about common and joint defense.
Do you have a solution?
Yeah, the solution is really to work within the governments to remove that stovepiping and to remove that NATO versus EU mindset. It's completely outdated, and we have to think of the specific capabilities that we need and what nations can fill in those capabilities and how we can share them together. And speaking about transatlantic alliance or relationship, to have a really strong transatlantic artificial intelligence component or alliance as well in that sector in order to be able to move with innovation.
We have another question down here in the second row. Microphone way down here.
And there's a lady also on the left of yours.
This young lady with the long hair.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm one of the winners of 15 at 15. And I... we know that the effects of artificial intelligence can be dangerous, but my question is, can humans and AI coexist with each other peacefully without one taking over the other, and how?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Well,
Let me
Go.
start? Okay, let me start. Look, here's the deal. Artificial intelligence is a tool that can be used for good or for bad. You're going to see it when we start talking about, in this particular case, the defense of our countries, or offensively to have deterrence against those other countries who are going to try their best to create artificial intelligence to make their weapon systems better as well. But there's another part of it, and that is quality of life. We can we can change the quality of life when it comes to some of the most dread diseases that mankind has today. There's hundreds of different types of cancer. We can cure the vast majority of them in the next 5 years if we use artificial intelligence for the right reasons. Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's diseases, items that cost countries billions, if not trillions of dollars to take care of their elderly. But think of the quality of life that you improve if you can delay the onset of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Think of the quality of life of everybody in here that's been affected because you've lost a loved one to cancer. We can use artificial intelligence now, not 10 years from now, but beginning right now to find the cures for those dread diseases. But it requires investment participation, and absolutely the support of people around the world for their governments to invest in that type of innovation. But it is absolutely, it is not pie in the sky. It is for real. It's pumpkin pie this Thanksgiving, not 10 years from now.
And
There's an optimist.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's the human being who invented artificial intelligence. So at the end of the day, there is a red button called on and off. But nevertheless, we have to, take the advantage. I fully agree with the senator that, that we have to take the advantage of that and not be afraid. So we have to be brave, and, as long we have bright young people as you, so we have the future.
We have a question back here. Actually, we have a couple. So if we can move a mic over. There we go.
Hello, I'm Colonel Calaroy Landry, U.S. Space Force, and Peace with Women Fellowship 2023 member. So we've talked about dual-use technologies. We've talked about innovation around the globe. Senator, this might be a question for you. In order to tap into these global pockets of innovation, how do you see, or what are your thoughts on the influence of the international traffic in arms regulations in the ability to share innovation that we've had in the US with nations or even companies in other parts of the globe?
Yeah, really, look, can't you just talk to me a softball? Look, here's the deal. Artificial intelligence, as we create it right now, other countries are going to create it as well. The question is as we integrate it into our weapon systems, and it's being integrated right now into our weapon systems, I don't know how you stop a bad guy from getting a hold of it and doing the same thing. It's just like, I mean, right now, if you've got a Stinger missile, somebody's going to try to steal a Stinger missile, and they're going to try to move it around. But here's the difference. With artificial intelligence, this race is never going to end in our lifetimes, okay? We're going to constantly have to be one step up. As long as we have adversaries in the world, or as long as we have terrorists out there, they're going to be trying. What we need to do is to stay one step ahead of the bad guys all the time. Are they going to be looking for it? Yeah, but can we use artificial intelligence to identify whether or not someone is actually trying to steal it? I think we probably can. Can we trace it using artificial intelligence? Yes, I think we can. But that means that we've got to be one step ahead of them in every single aspect of this. And I know this comes right back to what we talked about before, which was regulation. If we regulate for those people that are innovators, unless they see it as a positive type of regulation, they're going to go elsewhere. I think right now, Europe and Great Britain are going to find out that some of those innovators, because of what's being proposed, might very well leave and come to the United States or to UAE. In some cases, for the United States, if we were to implement everything that the executive order had suggested, which may not be doable to begin with, but if it was, they may very well look for a third party someplace out there to go to, or it may slow down the development of AI. But with regard to that, look, we're not going to stop the folks, the bad guys, from trying to get a hold of it, but we should be able to use artificial intelligence to accelerate our capabilities to find and catch the bad guys when it comes to trying to steal those weapons.
Quick follow-up.
I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but I think that was the question that you had.
So quick follow-up. President Xi has vowed that he's going to win AI, and he's throwing a lot into the race. What makes you so sure that he won't win?
Well, we have no choice. We have no choice. If he wins, the game's over. But here's the deal. He doesn't want his people to have access to information. In fact, he wants to use AI to stop them from getting access to information. If you were a developer, if you were one of these bright brains out there that actually participates in this, where would you rather be? Would you rather be in China? Or would you rather be in Europe or the United States? And the answer is they don't want to be in China. Look, they don't have walls keeping people out. They have walls keeping people in. and we got to keep it that way. We want the best and brightest people in the world to want to immigrate into our countries. They want to come here and innovate and be everything they can be. The only way that we win this is if we keep the brightest minds out there coming here rather than being stuck in places like China.
Quick follow-up from Liam and Madam President.
Very quick thing, just to add to what you said, Senator. I think one of the crucial decisions that the U.S. has made is the restriction of access to sophisticated semiconductors, microchips. China does not have that access, and it will take them years and lots of investment to catch up.
It's an interim, though, only.
Yes,
it won't fix
I
it.
think that's really a step in the right direction. And if you look at the war in Ukraine as well, semiconductors or sophisticated weapons have been making such a huge difference. So,
but I'd love to hear what Liam thinks about this.
Well, the thing I was trying to put a word in was about, and it reflects a little bit on Ukraine as well. It's one of the reasons why Ukraine was able to leverage technology really well is because they've had a brilliant heritage of investment in STEM within their education. And the point that the Senator raised earlier was about capabilities. And capability in terms of the ability to always have a very high-end and highly educated workforce is the competitive edge that governments can get and can generate for themselves. And we're sitting on a panel with the #1 education country in the world, according to PISA, which is Estonia. And you can see what they had in Ukraine. The investment in education is so important. And so countries that want to long-term get ahead will invest in STEM education.
Madam President, did you want to weigh in on that question?
no, I completely agree. Education is the key.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, you know, bright young guys, and at the end of the day, when we have a very good education, then hopefully we don't have, you know, the bad guys who would like to steal the stinger, you know.
So this may be repetitive given what you've just said, but I wanted to do another quick round robin and get from each of you the #1 thing that can and should be done to increase the pace of innovation and the pace of innovation adoption. Liam, you want to start this one?
Yeah, investment in high-end education.
Yes, innovation does not mean just technological development. Innovation also means changing the ways we think, we do business, we take decisions. So innovation is not just about capabilities, innovation is also about concepts.
#1 thing we could do?
Well, when we talk about specifically and strictly about the innovations, then yeah, well, money is always important, but it's more important to know that there are no regulations. I know that I said regulations regarding the artificial intelligence and, you know, that regulating how we can, you know, control who is pulling the trigger. But at the end of the day, less you have regulations, more you have innovation. That's for sure.
Senator?
You've heard some great answers there. They're all correct. But there's one that we're missing, and that is can you imagine a good regulation? Think about patents and copyrights. If you're an inventor, you want to go someplace where you can protect your patents and your copyrights and where somebody can own an idea.
But this is after that you have innovated something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you can get paid to innovate, you're going to come there. And so for me, it's not just that, but the protection of patents and copyrights in the era of AI.
Thank you to my great panel, and thank you to all of you for your questions. Appreciate it. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.